All right, welcome everyone to the last of our 6 sessions in Scouting Serves Jewish Youth during Virtual Faith Week from the Philmont Training Center. I am using my Boy Scout camp chapel background this morning in honor of the fact that it is Sunday, and ordinarily I would be at chapel in the Boy Scout camp leading Shacharit services, or one of our other local members of our Jewish Committee on Scouting would be doing that. Today is the day that the boys go to camp. Camp has been delayed and shortened, and lots of social distancing rules like no eating in the dining hall, everybody's going to eat in their own camps and so on. And today they're going. So that's my background. Today we have a really important session, and I'm so glad you all are participating. You've been very interactive, and I know you will be today as well. In addition to our faculty, the point of today's program is to discuss the importance and the value of engaging and being visible for Jewish Scouting beyond our unit. You know, you all do this. The vast majority of parents are parents of youth, and they just concentrate on their experience in their unit and their youth's experience in their unit. So we all know, however, that there is a variety of things that are valuable beyond the unit. And in my introduction, I'm just going to share a few of them. But first, I want to let you know who the faculty are for this morning. Phil Sternberg, who is in the National Capital Area Council, but chairs the Northeast Region Jewish Committee on Scouting. Frank Udelman, who chairs the Western Region. He's in Tucson, but he also is the newly elected executive vice president or president-elect of the National Jewish Committee on Scouting, and he will take over in a year. Gideon Horberg, who's a scoutmaster in Northeast Illinois Council. Jamie Frame, remind me which council you're in. I apologize for not remembering.
National Capital Area.
You are,
NCAC.
Okay, great, great. All right, so in the purpose of introduction, I would just remind us that Scouting recognizes 42 different official religious traditions for purpose of youth being able to wear their religious emblems on their uniform. So it's clearly a very diverse and welcoming organization. That said, Jews are a pretty small portion. We're less than 1%. Muslims aren't much more represented. Sikhs, Hindus, very few. So unless the Jews have visibility, not judging, just recognizing that Scouting defaults to a Christian organization. And that has implications for when things are scheduled on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, because there's nobody around to give them any different advice, and so on. So there are a number of ways to get involved. In our council, for example, I'm the primary faculty for teaching chaplains and chaplains' aides interfaith worship and interfaith behaviors, like interfaith grace before meals, interfaith invocations and benedictions, worship services, using the word God instead of a specific name of God, etc. I teach chartered organization representative training. I coordinate our 10 Commandment treks and faith walks, which are very good for giving visibility to lots of different religions, and as we've talked about earlier in the week. There's another way. I'm a past council vice president for membership. We have had a number of Jews who've served on the council board. You know, that takes some time and effort, but if you have one, like in our case, we've even had a couple of Jewish presidents of our council. The immediate past president, Zach Shafran, is Jewish. That's really tremendous visibility. But even so, even if you don't choose to do any of those things, if you just make yourself available as the resource for the Jewish calendar, then people will call on you, but you have to take responsibility for making yourself visible. You can't just count on other people thinking of it. So that's just an introduction. I'm going to turn it over at this point to Phil Sternberg, and we're going to get going with our other faculty, Phil, Frank Udelman, Gideon Horberg, Jamie Frame. So what is it that's important about Jews being visible and engaged in the council beyond our unit? Phil, would you start?
I will. So thank you, Norm. I want to start by saying, you know, in 1910, when the Boy Scouts of America was created, our country was still pretty rural, and many places really didn't know about Judaism. There were no, to the best of my knowledge, organizations, and there were many that served young people that really welcomed Jewish young people into the fold and to be part of their organization. And when the Boy Scouts were formed, it immediately became an organization that was open to everybody, regardless of their race, their religion, their creed, whatever. Obviously, you know, people did join together in units that were sponsored by churches, etc. But there was the 92nd Street Y in New York, and a scout troop was formed there. And one of the principal organizers of the Boy Scouts of America back in those days was a guy named Mortimer Schiff. And Schiff was the son of Jewish immigrants from Germany, and his family, his father was a financial wizard, and they had some money, and he supported the creation of this new organization. And in fact, he was made the second president of the Boy Scouts of America. The second president of the Boy Scouts of America. Problem is, he only lived a month in the office, so he wasn't a president for long. But the point was that the organization was ecumenical right from the start. And I think that makes me very proud, because when I talk to people about why are Jews in scouting, it's because Jews have always been in scouting. This is the immigrants that came to the United States, Jews and non-Jews alike, thought scouting was one of the ways to become an American citizen, become a real American. The other way was baseball. But we won't argue about that, Seth. Anyway, I think baseball and scouting will make people good citizens. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to Gideon. Gideon, what would you like to add?
Hi, everyone. I think Frank was supposed to be next, but I'll go ahead and talk. So when I was a scout, and for many years as a scout, our district and council would schedule our first aid meet for a Sunday. And our troop, which was a Jewish troop, I'm the scoutmaster now of that troop, we were able to participate in the first aid meet. When I went away to college, and after I came back from college in 2016, returned to the area and became involved again in our troop, our troop wasn't participating in the first aid meet because it was moved to a Saturday, and it was always a Saturday. I don't know why the shift happened. I don't know the background on that, but a few years back, maybe around 2018, 2019, Howard Prager, who's on this call, he and I were talking with council, and we said, Troop 62, a Jewish troop, isn't able to participate in the first aid meet because it's scheduled on a Saturday. And I think it was ignorance or a lack of understanding that they were scheduling the first aid meet and other council and district events always on Saturday, a day when Jewish people can't participate. So we let them know, and what we said was, we can give you a Jewish calendar, and we can tell you what days on the Jewish calendar you shouldn't schedule anything on if you want Jewish participation of any scouts. It doesn't matter if they're in a Jewish troop or if they're in a quote-unquote normal troop. If you want Jewish participation, you can't schedule events on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, on the first 2 days of Passover, on the first 2 days of any Jewish holiday, on most Jewish holidays like Pesach, Sukkot, Shavuot, because you won't be able to get scouts from there if they're religious. And we explained that to them. So they made a concession, and what they did was, there are 3 districts within our council. So they've decided to make our district's first aid meet on rotating days, so Saturday or Sunday, depending on the year. But another district in our council might have the first aid meet on the Sunday when our district has it on the Saturday. That being said, so they've made that concession for us to be able to have us attend. I think one thing that's important is it's on us to participate now, and it's on us to attend. It's on us to be willing participants when they make the right move for Jewish people to be able to participate. I want to say one other thing before I yield the floor. I was listening a few weeks ago to my rabbi who, and for those who don't know, a rabbi is a Jewish spiritual leader. And she said that she was asked the question, is social action, is social justice Jewish? And what I would say is that links Judaism and Scouting. Scouting is very much a social justice, social action oriented organization. The slogan is "Do a good turn daily." And I live by that principle. And I think that principle unites Judaism to Scouting as well. I know for many years when I was growing up, my Reform synagogue and my Reform camp were very against Scouting. My Reform camp director wouldn't let me work on merit badges because he disagreed with Scouting in general. I think what he disagreed with was our stance at that time on gays in Scouting and all of that. I think that what we need to emphasize now, especially in a time when synagogue membership is dwindling, is that we do a good turn daily, and we emphasize that, and that Scouts, Jewish kids, can become Scouts and have that emphasis through Scouting. So thank you. I'll yield, I think, to Frank Udelman.
Yeah, thank you, Gideon. Really good points. And I think one of the issues that you raised, the fact that we went through this hiatus of concerns about diversity in Scouting, not only affected the Jewish community, it affected a lot of communities. And we have many people who today I think would be excellent leaders in the Jewish community who never were able to participate in Scouting because of the stance that their synagogues and temples took. So that's something that we have to overcome. Frank, it's up to you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, everybody, for participating this morning. As mentioned, Jews are definitely a minority. I live in Tucson, a community of about 1 million people. And of the million, approximately 25 to 30,000 people are Jewish. So you can just imagine the population of Jewish Scouts. I've been involved in Scouting for about 20 years in the Catalina Council. I was not a Scout as a youth. I've only done it as an adult as my son went through Scouting. And to say that we have been a minority would be an understatement. So I think it's important for us to be visible. And I'm going to give a couple of examples why being visible does make a difference. Over the years, our council has had a problem in utilizing the national calendar that has what I call our red letter days as far as holidays, when activities should be or not be. So historically, we have popcorn pickup on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur or on the Sabbath. We've had wood badge numerous times on the high holidays as well as on the Sabbath. And it's been a constant battle for that particular thing. In fact, we have a new motion right now in front of the board to go back to accepting the national calendar for determining what holidays should have events and not have events. The interesting thing was, as I was told by the council, because I also sit on the board, is I was arguing for you know, because there were some people saying, well, we shouldn't be shut down on having activities during Ramadan. And I said, why not? We need to respect all religions because we're training our future youth to become future adults to understand and respect all religions out there. But probably the greatest example why we need to be vocal is when I was in Woodbadge. In our council, up until about a year ago, we were predominantly one religion. Consequently, that one religion dominated most of your activities. So I happen to have been a chaplain's aide. When we had our first Scouts Own, during the Scouts Own, I obviously had my head covered and everybody else had their head uncovered, which created quite a brouhaha to the point where I was asked to leave Woodbadge because I wasn't respecting people's religions. Thank goodness there was another district executive there that was a little bit more intelligent than the rest of the people. And they allowed me to stay, and it turned into an educational process of there are different ways to participate in a service. There are different religions. We all have different rules of etiquette, but they all had to be taught the rule of, you know, being respectful to everybody. Still have a concern with that though, because when we go to council and district events, as I think it was Phil that mentioned, instead of just using, you know, a no name, they're still closing prayers in the name of particular people. So we have some challenges still to go, but by having a committee, at least it's a place for us to go to then be able to go and present to the board. Unfortunately, we're still the Wild West out here. As much as I love Tucson and I've lived out here for 2/3 of my life, they do have problems understanding that there are people out there that are not Christian or some denomination of Christianity. So without any further ado at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie.
Wait. Before Jamie talks, Frank, I went through pilot training in Arizona and visited Tucson several times and visited the, and if those of you that don't know about this, there is a large area where aircraft are stored.
The mothball fleet, yep.
Yeah, they're sort of mothballed. I mean, some of them actually have been brought back into operation. But the interesting thing about that is it was in the desert when I went to visit back in the late 60s. Now it's right in the middle of the city. I understand there's a thruway that goes right over the aircraft. So things do change.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. That we have the mothball fleet. As Phil mentioned, some planes have been brought back into service, but that mothball fleet and the missile silos around southern Arizona put Tucson on the top 10 list during the Cold War to be obliterated off the map if they ever did drop bombs.
Right.
Tucson. And we were talking baseball earlier, which is my favorite sport. We used to have the Tucson Toros, which was the Oakland A's AAA minor league system team.
Wow. So I want to introduce Jamie Frame. Jamie is in the same district that I'm in. He's in the one and only Orthodox troop in Northern Virginia. And Jamie has been just a remarkable asset. He's still going to college. He's 20 years old. And he's served as our Jewish chaplain at our council camp for the past 3 summers. And he's done other things, of course, at the council camp. And his service has been recognized, and he's received the Shofar Award, and may be the youngest adult in our Jewish scouting tradition to have received that award. So it's quite an honor. And without further ado, Jamie, I turn it over to you.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Mr. Sternberg. Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie. As was said, I've worked at the local council camp, which is called Goshen Scout Reservation, for the last 4 summers. And I was the Jewish chaplain down there. I also worked down there as an EMT. I was their first aider. And I actually wanted to open today by telling you all a story from my time at Goshen. It was one week I was working in the first aid room as the EMT when I had a really, really homesick scout come by the first aid room. And from sitting down and chatting with him, I learned that the scout was Jewish. And the reason he was so miserable and hated camp so much was he felt like no one was respecting him. That morning, they cooked the eggs in the grease from the bacon, which for this Orthodox scout, he wasn't able to eat any breakfast. He was really hungry. They didn't give him a vegetarian option for lunch, and he was absolutely miserable, for lack of a better word. And what I told him was, let's sit down, let's come up with a plan, but also this coming Friday night, we're going to be having our Jewish Friday night services. It'll be up at the camp post. There will be challah, which is the bread we eat on Fridays. There will be the grape juice, and it's really nice. All the camps will come together. And this kid's face, I wish you all could have seen it. It just lit up. He, every night at Flags, came up to me and was like, "Hey, Jamie, is the Friday night service still happening?" And a few weeks after camp finished, I got a letter from his mom in the mail saying, "Hi, Jamie, you probably don't know me. I'm the mom of this scout. I just want to tell you he talked about you all the time when he came home. It really saved his camp experience." And the reason I wanted to tell you all this story was because I think it is an excellent example of illustrating what we've all been talking about, of the importance between scouting and Judaism, and there being that public knowledge of the overlap. As we all know, the Scout law has things like trustworthy, loyal, helpful, and those are all really present in Jewish law as well. So they, simply put, you can't have one without the other. I will finish up by telling you, me personally, I think about who I am today and who I was before I started scouting, and they are two completely different people. And so much of that is attributed to scouting. And Mr. Sternberg mentioned, I was a member of the only Jewish troop in Virginia. And if that opportunity wasn't available, I would be a completely different person. So to summarize what I was saying, but also what everyone else so excellently put, is regardless of what religion, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, scouts in all of our troops happen to be, we all need to talk to them, figure out their customs, figure out what we can do to make that scouting experience better for them. Because I personally, if no one had done that for me, wouldn't have been able to do scouting. And we all know the benefits of our youth being able to be part of this program. So that's really the message that I wanted to talk about today, was just, even though it might seem an inconvenience, or why do something to benefit one kid where I have 40 other scouts who it doesn't make sense. To that one scout, it will be everything and so important. So thank you everyone for coming today. That's what I wanted to say.
Wonderful, Jamie. So Norm, I'd like to open it up to people if they want to comment. Overall, I think the focus is making other people aware of what we do in scouting and Judaism, but also making Jews in our community aware that scouting exists and that these opportunities are available to them. That's a very difficult challenge, and something that I think we have to face in the future, and have to figure out a way to really let people know, because I think the communications is just not there. And I will open it up. If anybody has anything they want to say, just raise your hand and we'll call on you. Susan?
I would just start by reminding people that one of the most important things that we can do is be a resource for the Jewish calendar, and for that matter, for the calendar of important religious days in the 42 religions that Scouting recognizes. That said, we all know this, but we need to be reminded of it. That doesn't mean that it's always going to work. You're always going to be challenged. with a council that schedules something or forgets to call you or whatever. But it can be very effective to be a resource for your council on the calendar.
And Norm, I think I'd add one more thing. The other thing that we want to be able to let people know about is our religious emblems. It's amazing to me how many families will come up to me after an event and say, I didn't know that it was available for my kids to do. How do I get started? And you know, we really actually have a very, very nice website, and all the information is there. And once you tell people about it, they get very excited, because especially the parents of young scouts, Cub Scouts. And you know, in my job now as the Northeast Region Chairman, I must get, I don't know, 10, 12 questions a year people asking me about, how do I get started with this? You know, I'd like my son to earn the Maccabee Award or the Ner Tamid or whatever. Anyway, does anybody else want to chime in?
I was going to say, you know, as we bring up concerns to our local councils, I think the other thing we also need to do is sometimes come with some solutions. It's one thing to complain. It's another thing to come up with a solution. So one of the ideas that I came up with for this year for popcorn pickup, because they did call me regarding popcorn pickup because they were going to schedule it on Yom Kippur, I vehemently said you cannot do that. They said, but we need to have pickup, and or if we don't do it on Saturday, we're not going to have enough people to man the delivery. I said, here's the deal: you don't do it on Yom Kippur, or for that matter on Sabbath as well, I won't get all your volunteers for you. So guess what? I have staffed their entire popcorn pickup, and Yom Kippur is left to us to go to services where we need to be, and there's no conflict. But just in general, we can't always be the ones that are complaining. We have to come up with some solutions sometimes as well.
Frank, I'd like to add that and just reinforce what you said and give you an example. You know, in my view, of all the things that I've experienced in scouting, I think the single most valuable thing that Jews can do is to get involved in teaching in the chaplain and chaplain aid course. Because that's where you get to model and insert interfaith respect, interfaith names, interfaith behaviors, interfaith worship, all of these issues about calendaring and so on. So if, you know, you can take chaplain aid training online, but if you do it in live in your council, here's another example of don't just complain, but get in there and teach in the chaplain aid course. I see Susan's hand.
Good morning, and thank you for calling upon me. I was on Jamboree staff 13, and I was in security. I had different partners I worked with, but the one young man I worked with the most, he was 19. And he had told me that, he said, I'm disappointed, Susan, because my religion isn't giving anything out in the faith and worship. I said, well, what religion are you? And he said, I'm Jewish. And I said, oh. Now, he had told me earlier in the week that his mother was very ill. She wasn't expected to live. His father never went to services. And he was just lost. And he didn't know what he was going to do when he went home. Should he go back to college or not? Because his mother's so ill. When he told me he was Jewish, I kind of made up a story about security needed in faith and worship. And we walked over there, and I took him to the Jewish tent. And he was not happy with me. I introduced him. I told him, I said, I know Peter Hyman. I'm on national committees, so, you know, I'll take you over there. No, I don't want to go. So I made up this story, and we went over. And the people in the tent were welcoming. They were so excited he was there. And they said, give Susan your camera. She can take pictures. And forgive me, I don't know all of the ceremonies, but it was where they wrapped his arm. And then, so you know what I'm talking about. I don't, but you do. So he said, give Susan your camera. And he said, no, the battery's low. He said, well, I'm sure Susan has a camera, because we all knew why he didn't want this. You know, I had taken him and fooled him, and now here we were. So they ended up, everyone danced after they had the different ceremonies, and they were so happy. He was so angry with me. but they gave him the hammock, help me.
Yeah, keep up.
Yeah, thank you. And I usually know that word. They actually gave me one because they said, thank you, you brought him home. Well, he was still angry with me. And I said, listen, I have all these pictures. He goes, I don't want those pictures. And I said, okay. He went home, and a month later, he said, Susan, may I have those pictures? My mother wants to see them. Oh, I'm going to cry again. It was the most gratifying experience. But I've been helping Scouts of other religions since 1980. I'm Roman Catholic, but I feel like once we know there's religious emblems, we have to take it to everybody. And so in 1980, there weren't computers, and I would just write to organizations and help a lot of people. But this story from Jamboree just stands out so much to me, that one person can make the difference. One person doing an introduction or showing something can make a difference.
Thank you, Paul.
Susan, thank you so much for that story. The rabbi who would go around and ask people to put on tefillin, that's what it's called, is a fellow named Rabbi Shmuley Goodnick. And he was just unrelenting in his quest for anybody who was Jewish at the Jamboree and asking them to put on tefillin. So I think Paula wants to say something.
Right. So you know that I speak up here, and I do that in my everyday life as well. And about 6 years ago, I was speaking with someone in my district, and I had been a committee member at large, and I said, you know, I came across when I was doing something, I saw a patch for or a position code for a district chaplain. Who's our district chaplain? And she said, well, we don't have one. I said, well, why not? Well, because we don't know. And I said, well, do any other districts have chaplains? She says, very few. She said that the council had gone, while there's a lot of very deeply religious people in the council, it had gone fairly secular in terms of how it managed events and it managed the business of the council. And she says, why are you interested? I said, well, I'm a chaplain. So yes, I'm interested. If there's a spot to step into, I'll step into it. And so I've been district chaplain for 5.5 some years. What was interesting was I immediately set about to doing things like, people would say, okay, so our new district chaplain is going to lead us in prayer. Everybody take off your hats. And I put up my hand and says, excuse me, let us all prepare for prayer. And so it was really funny to watch what I called the closet Jews who didn't really come out and say they were Jewish, suddenly put their hats on. And everybody else was taking their hats off. And it was this really interesting thing that started happening. So I kind of made a point of that. And then I was using prayers that were very universalist in style, keeping in mind that we have a very strong Buddhist and Hindu population here as well. And so I needed to make, I was really I got creative, but somebody came up to me one time and said, that prayer you read, there were a series of lines in there. I recognize those. I said, where do you recognize them from? From the Siddur. I said, exactly. When you take the Siddur and translate it, it's fairly universal. But I also then started doing chaplain aid workshops and teaching exactly what Norm was saying we need to be doing. And as a result, the awareness I became the go-to person. Hey, I've got this interfaith thing, or hey, I've got a kid from a different religion than most of the kids in our troop. What do we do? So I've become the go-to person in that. I've not been able to get the council to do the calendar stuff too much. Their general saying is, this is the only weekend available. And they were trying to persuade me to come to various wood badges for years. And I kept saying, sorry, Passover, sorry, Rosh Hashanah, sorry, Kippur, sorry. And it's just like and I just kept telling them, well, we moved it to June for you. Great, it's on Shavuot now. And they're like, so now, then I started having other wood badge directors before they placed the date saying, hey, we're planning one. When's going to work for you? So we finally found one. But I said, now, this thing that starts on Saturday morning, I need to come in on Friday. How are we going to do that? And they're like, oh. So why is that? So I explained about because it's outside of it. While I will drive on Shabbat within a very limited radius, I'm not driving to camp. It's too far. And I'm not hauling, and I'm not setting up tents, and I'm not doing all of those things. So I needed to be in place on Friday. So we worked it all out. I brought in my food and whatnot, and I've had to educate dining hall people that no, I'm not taking my hat off when I walk into dining hall, because we're going to say grace. My head is covered when I pray. And so I've had this constant educate, and because I've just sort of made it my thing to be, I am like the running around here because I make a serious point of it.
Thank you, Paula. I'm going to take this opportunity.
I also then dress more modest and Jewish thing. So.
Thanks. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm just going to take this opportunity to see if there's anybody either on the faculty or among the almost 30 of us who are participating who has something they really want to say before moving to the last part of the session.
Yes, Norm, I'd like to say that one of the things that, that we advertise is to tell people about, our customs and Judaism, but also is to learn about the other religions and what their faiths might, translate that we need to know about. So if, I know we have several Roman Catholics on the teleconference, and if there's anybody of any other religion that would like to say, here's what I think Jews need to know about us, I'd really appreciate that.
Well, you got Phyllis and Shalinda raising their hands.
Well, let's pick on Shalinda. She's farther away.
Pick on me, Phil? That's not a smart move. You should know that by now. What I found that works best here in Longhouse Council is we are very large. Hundreds and hundreds of miles of the council. Is I sit down with every new district executive that gets hired at council to let them know who I am and who I represent. So when they're out meeting all their units, they can, hey, we know someone who can help you with that, which works really well.
Good point.
Thank you, Shalinda. Phyllis?
Okay, I had to unmute. We have a position in our council referred to as religious relationships for each district. You're looking at it. About 20 years ago, when we redistricted, we went from 7 down to 4 districts. And it was the first Scout Sabbath, Scout Sunday weekend that particular year. And I went to St. Elizabeth's Church, and they offered me to, I think it's called presenting the host, when they bring up the wafers and the wine to the front of the church. And I said, I thank you very much for the offer. I was very honored, but I'm Jewish and I can't do that. And you can see them say, oh, and I said, let me talk to you about it afterwards, and we explained it and so forth. By having an opportunity for the Scouts to go to Scout Sabbath as well as Scout Sunday and seeing how we all believe the same way, but we pray differently. I still think back to the year that we had the Mormons come and visit our temple for the very first time. These are adults as well as youth, had never been to a Jewish synagogue before. And we had an opportunity to be able to open the altar. It was on a Friday night, but the rabbi was very accommodating and say, this is what our Torahs look like. And we had a Holocaust Torah, so they could actually see what the inside of a Torah looked like. And it was a wonderful, major learning experience for those outside of our faith, but are showing a respect of their faith and explaining, and made a heck of a difference, let me tell you. We're still doing that. We still try harder. Thank you.
So let's take this opportunity to show our appreciation to our faculty from this morning, who were just so helpful. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to ask you all, if you can stay, 3 questions. I'm going to ask you to answer these questions in the chat, because I'm going to copy and paste them all so I can take it back to the planning committee who planned this particular course and may have the opportunity to plan the next course. If you cannot put it in the chat for some reason, or if you just want to put it in the chat and say it out loud, then after you put it in the chat, raise your hand and I'll call on you. So here are the 3 questions. First, from this whole week, what is the one thing that you think worked best? Now, you just thought of it. So put it in the chat. The one thing from the week that worked best. The second question will be, what is the one thing from this week that maybe needs a little work before we repeat it? And the third question is, if we get the opportunity to do this again, what should we include? So, best thing from the week, something from the week that needs a little improvement, and if we're going to do this again, what should we be sure to include in the next course? So I'll give you a few minutes to put that in the chat, and then I'll look for people's hands and see if you want me to call on you.
So what was the second one?
So the second one was, is there something from this week that maybe needs a little work to improve before we repeat it?
I'm sorry, can you repeat number 3 again?
Sure. Number 3 is, if we're going to get a chance to do this course again, what should we include? What should we be sure to include?
While everyone's typing, I just want to say I saw a couple things in the chat about more specifics, like how do I do this, how do I do that? That's going to vary from council to council and even troop to troop, but I know myself, and I don't want to offer for the rest of the faculty, but I'm sure anyone here would be more than happy either by email or phone. I would love to tell you how my troop did it, because we actually went through a few phases. We started as a very orthodox troop, and then we became a very more conservative troop, and then quite recently we're back to being mostly orthodox scouts. So if anyone wants to have those more one-on-one conversations, definitely let me know, or anyone here.
Jamie, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Jamie will be a terrific resource, as will the rest of the faculty. And if you have any questions about, now, who was that person on Tuesday, et cetera, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. My email, here, I'll put my email in the chat room so everybody can have it. Okay, there you go. You all are being great about putting things in the chat room. That's terrific. Is there anyone else who would like to contribute aloud?
So I do have a question. In the past, our Jewish Committee on Scouting has hosted this event at Philmont itself, at the Philmont Training Center. And the participation hasn't been all that great because, it's a long way away, it's expensive, you have to take a week off from work. But let me tell you, Philmont's a wonderful place to take a week off from work with your family, and it's always been a wonderful experience. I'm thinking that maybe the future would look like, if we, ever get back to normal, maybe a combination program where we would do stuff online, teleconferencing, and also at the training center, because we certainly, there's this value in coming together as human beings and seeing each other in person, I think, as well. That's my opinion.
Well, as one who just loves Philmont and has been to the Philmont Training Center a number of times, I couldn't agree with you more. But I'm also agreeing with the fact that this online program, look, there were 75 people who participated over the course of the week in this program. We would never get 75 people at our course at Philmont. So there's clearly some value in doing it by Zoom, even though Philmont is a very special place. The other thing that's nice about Philmont is that you're there with 120, 130 people in person from all the other faiths all day, every day. You get to eat with them. You get to go on hikes with them. And that's a really special opportunity for interfaith appreciation as well.
So I think, like Susan said, you know, the Jamboree also is an amazing experience. And we've actually had some pretty good participation at Jamborees on the part of the Jewish Committee on Scouting. And, you know, this last World Jamboree, I mean, there were Jews from all over the world that came to our synagogue tent, and we had services, and I mean, just remarkable stuff. One of the people who has not been participating is a longtime Scoutmaster named Howard Spielman, who is in the Boston area and has a Shomer Shabbat, a very Orthodox troop, and he's going to be running the Jewish Committee's participation at the National Jamboree in 2021. And, you know, Frank Udelman has, or excuse me, not Frank, but other people on our National Jewish Committee have offered to help him and stuff like that. And even if you can't go to the Jamboree, you know, full time, if it's not too much out of your way, you know, you ought to go visit, because it's really a remarkable experience.
Ed Goldstein.
Just have one question, or kind of thing, just an idea of what we could be doing in the future. Is it possible that we could set up some kind of computer timeshare type, whatever you want to call it, monthly, have a monthly subject where people that are attending this function that we're doing now, or others from around the country, could call in and have a computer-wide discussion.
Great suggestion. I'm writing it down. Thank you.
Just a monthly thing, and it could be a different theme each month, but just once a month. Say it's the first Thursday of the month or the first Tuesday of the month, barring holidays. You know, and just have open discussion about some of the subjects that we're talking about now, but have a 1 or even a 2 hour kind of discussion online.
Thanks,
Ted, I really like that. And I'd like to maybe focus on local council issues. So, you know, we could help people. And that kind of a forum would be a really, really good place to do that, I think.
It would sort of be the same kind of thing we're doing now, once a year, but in a modified version, doing it just one subject at a time, once a month, and open it to questions if there's district problems or council problems for that matter.
Great. Other comments? Your chats are still coming in. Thank you very much.
So Norm, one of the comments that I've made to some of the people in the National Capital Area Council is I'm a little disappointed that more people have not participated. I'm delighted with the number that have, but I'm sort of not sure why others haven't. And I think, you know, it could be that people, at least during the week, are working now and, you know, can't take an hour off at 11 o'clock or something like that, or whenever they're, you know, whatever time zone they're in. But I was really hoping that more people would participate. And the other thing that I thought about, and we talked about this, I think, Norm, with you and with the other folks planning this, was how about youth? Is there something that we can do like this that would be effective for young people in Jewish Scouting? I mean, after all, that's what this is about, right? So maybe we could do something that would be interesting to younger people. And you know, they're all doing Zoom now. It's not a challenge for them.
Good idea. I'm writing all these down. Thank you. Well, I see Mark's hand. Mark Clemens.
I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. We've got one Jewish Scout troop and a few Jewish Scouts scattered in other troops. But you know, this is great, and having it zoomed out to everybody means you'll get more, and next year you'll have even more. First time is always the tough one. But you need to figure out how to get it to the Jewish Scouts leaders more directly. because you get a lot of email, especially during COVID. The other thought is with the Jewish awards, and it was great, the idea of using religious awards to promote scouting would be to put together some sort of canned cell to take to rabbis to get into the schools, because right now a lot of places don't have anything planned for the fall because they can't meet. And here we have a planned program that's easy to do by Zoom, and use it to go to the rabbis and say, look, here's something we can do together.
Thank you very much, Mark. Good suggestion.
I've been
Anyone
to
else?
just about every one of the Northeast regions annual conferences. I think out of the 30 umpteen of them, I've missed 2 or 3. But the constant thing that my wife and I have always noticed is that that every time we come up with suggestions at the breakout sessions, that we get that we've already done that opinion, or we're overwhelmed by the places that have lots of Jews, and lots of places like the New York's, like the Boston group and the Philadelphia group and the Baltimore group. And up here in the diaspora, which doesn't have as many Jewish kids, a lot of those things that work in the big places don't work in the small, and we've never been able to get that opinion through to people. So I'd like to see more discussion to do in smaller communities like Rochester and Syracuse that have very few synagogues, and there's probably lots of Jewish kids and troops all over the place. We just got to figure out a way to find them.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll just remind you all that the planning committee includes all 4 regional chairs. So Phil Sternberg from the Northeast region, Mike Nathan from the Southern region, myself from the Central region, and Frank Udelman from the Western region. So we will all take this feedback into consideration. And we'll try not to say, oh, that's been tried before. We'll try never to say that. All right, we are, yes, Ted.
It's Ted. I just have one other thing to say, just an idea that came across, and I don't know if this exists. If a brochure could be prepared for presentation, or that you walk into a rabbi's office of that's not supporting the scout, that his congregation is not actively supporting the program, but maybe even 2 or 3 different types of brochures, one geared Orthodox Jewish congregations versus conservative or reform, this type of thing, just outlining what scouting can do for their congregation and their youth in their congregation. Something printed that and prepared by, like I said, each denomination or each Orthodox, conservative, reform, ammunition that can go in, but something that could be prepared and given to them. That's not going to take 20 minutes. It's a 5-minute discussion.
Good. Thank you, Ted. Well, we have reached the time when we are supposed to close because there are other courses. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all for your participation all week. I've seen you on other programs. I'm recognizing your faces. I wish I could meet you and have lunch with you today at the Philmont Training Center, but this is what we get to do this strange year. But all of you who have served as faculty and have contributed so much as participants, so interactively from all faiths, I want to express my appreciation. Great turnout, great sessions from my perspective. You've given us good feedback. I'm going to copy and paste everything you put in the chat, and we'll have a call of the planning committee soon to take it into consideration while it's still fresh. So with that, I hope that you all will enjoy the rest of the day. There's an interfaith service this afternoon at 5 Eastern. The National Jewish Chaplain, Rabbi Arthur Vernon, will be contributing to that, as will many others. So again, thank you all very much. And thank you for today's faculty. I'm going to double my, my positive input on today's faculty. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm, for everything.
And I'm going to stop recording at this point.
Thank you all.